Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Tim Donner, Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, and Graham Noble. And this is the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. The presidential hopefuls have all weighed in on the Palestinian-Israeli war. Across the board, barring one extreme long shot, all have declared solidarity with Israel in one way or another. But we all know wartime breeds a different kind of voter. Whether warhawk or pacifist, there's a candidate delivering promises. The early reports were that Joe Biden did a pretty good job at the start of this conflict defending Israel. But will that stick? Tim?
Well, he is putting all his eggs in the pro-Israeli basket, much like he has done with Ukraine. He has thrown all his chips on the table in favor of keeping Ukraine in this war with Russia. So, look, he thinks that, I think he has a vision, does Joe Biden, of Henry Kissinger style shuttle diplomacy, where he can go back and forth between Israel and the friendlier Arab states in particular, and large ones like Egypt, and somehow negotiated at least a ceasefire, some sort of cessation of hostilities. And then that will benefit him politically, right? Because he'll be seen as a uniter, not a divider, right? To use the political terms. But he's got a real problem on his left, because by putting himself in a position to actually travel to Israel in wartime, he has, in a sense, acted provocatively towards the left flank of his own party and against many in the Democratic Party who support the Palestinian cause, which is the best way to put it, or the easiest way to put it, to make it not look as bad as it really is. So Biden, and I did a piece on LibertyNation.com about this, about how war with a president generally is going to take down his approval. It's going to make the president less likely to be reelected. Now, there are exceptions to it. Really, just one, though. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but he had already been elected 3 times. And Hitler was seen as a threat to the entire world. Mm-hmm. So that was different. But in almost every other case, you see where war has brought presidents low. And I think Biden sees that probability, especially in light of the fact that the Ukraine war had already begun. So now we're talking about war in Eastern Europe. We're talking about war in the Middle East. We're talking about China beating the drums of war over Taiwan. This is not something that helps a sitting president in general. And so, and the fact that he's been so straight down the line pro-Israel is going to cause some problems for him. Let's put it this way. I'd be surprised if this new conflict on top of the Ukrainian war, especially when compared to Donald Trump's record of no new foreign wars, of keeping North Korea contained, of keeping Putin in his box, in having Israel in a relatively tranquil state during the Trump years. The comparison of the 45th and 46th presidents from the basis of foreign policy and international standing is not going to benefit Joe Biden.
Well, Dave, and let's grow off of Tim's statement. Do Americans want hawks or doves in times of war? I mean, where does the country normally align themselves?
Well, comparisons are oftentimes odious, but it's like asking a cancer patient if they want a doctor or a ventriloquist. You want thoughtful, decisive leadership to defeat an enemy. And in wartime, I'm afraid those qualities are more likely to be found in a hawk. What What Biden has that is going to be troubling for him is that he has started strong, he's burning bright, but where does he go from here? He put two carrier strike groups in the Eastern Mediterranean. Okay, and what are you going to do with them? You've got a Marine Expeditionary Force of about 2,000 that is designed to do expeditionary force things. Okay, so what are you going to do with them? Compare this again with Reagan, who, when he came into office, basically brought battleships back into fighting order. And when the problem happened in Lebanon, he put battleships there and shelled Hezbollah. I doubt that in the near term that Biden is going to take those kinds of decisive measures.
All right. Well, Graham, let's pivot to the GOP field. I mean, you got Nikki Haley. She seems pretty go-getter hawkish. Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis has sounded pretty clear and forceful as well. But I mean, out of those two, who stands as one of the most able to deal with this conflict?
Well, let me try to say this without try to keep a lid on my personal opinions about both of those candidates. But let's just, Nikki Haley has always struck me as actually a kind of establishment neoconservative type who is much more concerned with her own political career than with anything else, quite frankly. I don't. She's never demonstrated to me that she is the kind of person that cannot be swayed, who will stick to a position and just, you can move heaven and earth and you won't be able to get her to change her opinion. Her position. She's never struck me as someone who can do that. I think Ron DeSantis would be a stronger person to deal with this situation. Really, I think he's much more kind of no nonsense. This is what we need to do, and we're going to get it done. And I think former President Trump would handle it just as well, maybe, and perhaps better. But then again, I also think that this never would have happened if Trump was president right now. But that's just me.
Agreed.
But I'll say this, though. Here's the thing about dealing with the situation, and an American leader dealing with this situation is that they always seem to, their default position is always, well, I can make myself look good by going in there and negotiating peace, negotiating a ceasefire. Here's the thing. The Israelis, and I don't say this in a derogatory way, the Israelis are about the most stubborn people on the face of the planet when it comes to them defending their homes, and that's how it should be. And here's the thing: after what Hamas did, there is no chance that the Israelis are going to settle for any kind of ceasefire unless it's simply temporary ceasefires in order for people to leave or for hostages to be released, or little temporary ceasefires. But the Israelis are not going to agree to any kind of peace agreement until they have made Hamas pay for what they did. So any US leader or any US politician even who thinks they're going to go over there and kind of negotiate a peace, no, that's not going to happen, and they are going to fail. And then, of course, they'll look like a failure for doing so, because there will be no peace until Israel has exacted what it considers to be a proportional, revenge or response against Hamas.
Okay, Andrew, I'm going to bring you in on this one. Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, he has charmed some people, and there's a little push and a following. But does he have a good enough grasp on foreign affairs to even be able to stand with the rest and discuss it? Or do you think he's capable of maybe rising a little bit over this?
Yeah, I saw this exact argument during both debates. Nikki Haley made the case and Mike Pence made the case. But this idea that somehow an inexperienced person is not suited for foreign policy is ridiculous. Here's a question. Have any of these experienced individuals in Washington or elsewhere crafted a terrific foreign policy? Yep. Just look at the Middle East over the last, let's say, 30 years or 20 years. The smartest men and women government created some of these terrorist groups today. Israel supported Hamas in this fight against the Fatah, another fundamentalist group in Palestine. Jimmy Carter and Zbigniew Brzezinski armed and financed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in this fight against the Soviets. The Obama administration armed and trained extremist Syrian rebels in a fight against ISIS. So all these efforts have led to blowback in foreign policy. None of these people have done a good job. So, when you have a guy like Ramaswamy who has a more of a non-interventionist streak and says we should stay out of it, but, try to stand strong, I think that's more of a position that the American people would want. You look at throughout history, you asked Tim this question, and Dave, Richard Nixon, he was voted in to stop the war in Vietnam. George W. Bush, he said he wanted a humble foreign policy. He beats Al Gore. Obama, he trounced John McCain, the avid war hawk who wanted to bomb Iran. And Donald Trump, he was anti-war, and he was a lot more peaceful than Hillary Clinton, the quite hawkish Democrat. So you can't blame Ramaswamy or anybody else for wanting to advocate a non-interventionist foreign policy, considering the disastrous effects of the neoconservative agenda of the last 30-40 years. So President Trump, he had zero foreign policy experience. I'm sure Dave will agree with this. The geopolitical landscape was a lot calmer and peaceful than it is today.
Well, I think you can go back in history and see that most presidents, in fact, almost all of them, had no foreign policy experience per se. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who may be considered one of the most successful foreign policy presidents, he presided over essentially 2 wars. He was governor of New York. Mm-hmm. There's no foreign policy in New York, right? Ronald Reagan had no foreign policy experience, nor did Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton or George W. Bush or Donald Trump or Barack Obama, for that matter. The only ones who have really are Joe Biden and George H.W. Bush back in the late 1980s. So the idea that you have to have traveled a lot, that you have to have experience, I think it's a misnomer. You need to understand the human condition. You need to understand what motivates leaders, how to appeal to them. Donald Trump had zero foreign policy experience, and yet he was able to sustain peace over 4 years in very complicated situations. So I don't think experience really is much of a factor when it comes to foreign policy. I think it's very overrated.
Well, experience is one thing if you have experience of solving problems, but yes. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, can't remember who said this, but somebody said, Joe Biden has been wrong on every single foreign policy issue, pretty much throughout his career. And that's true. So, his, years of experience, what do they count for? When you've spent years getting something wrong, and then saying, well, this other person doesn't have any experience. I've had decades of experience, but when you're always wrong about something,
that's not exactly an advantage.
No. Might be experience, just not a skill set you want to promote. All right, guys, around the horn real quick. Do you think the conflict in the Mideast is going to benefit the GOP in general, or Donald Trump specifically, or not?
I say yes. A world at peace in the Trump administration stands in especially sharp contrast to the world under Biden, with hotspots all over the globe and 2 flat-out ground wars.
Yeah, and I'd agree. I'd say yes. I don't think it really benefits anyone, but I think it's better for politically it's better for the GOP than for the Democrats, and specifically, I think you got to remember that look at coming back to these pro-Palestinian, essentially pro-Hamas demonstrations, that a certain element of the progressive left has really shown its true colors.
Yes.
In terms of being, this, again, condoning basically, or at least refusing to condemn, the slaughter of hundreds of civilians in the name of their kind of preferred political agenda. I think that's incredibly, and the more that goes on, the more damaging that is going to be to the Democrats.
I think that what you're looking at is that the Democrats are going to be the victims of optics. The Democrats have to answer for the debacle in Afghanistan. That is a lens through which everyone is going to see the Biden administration. And the optics here are that the world is ablaze with anti-American riots, all because of the fact that they see the American administration as being feckless and weak. And when you get that impression, you can anticipate that there's going to be a backlash around the world.
Andrew, from your perch in Canada, you might have a little different opinion. So what do you think?
It depends on who the nominee is. If it's Mike Pence and Nikki Haley and they're advocating for deploying troops to the region, I don't think that would benefit the Republican Party. But if you have, let's say, Donald Trump or Ramaswamy, who are advocating more of a diplomatic approach, not sending troops overseas, then I think that would benefit more the Republicans than the current administration's plan.
Well, I guess there you have it, people. When flames of war are fanned, Americans want a leader who can be forceful and fair, but not take any prisoners either. Thanks, panel. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform: YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for Free Thinking, Free Speech, LibertyNation.com.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at LibertyNation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are LibertyNation.com.